This is our second podcast, the Radical Honesty Podcast with Brad Blanton. My name is Tony Shawcross. And what are we going to talk about today, Brad?
We're going to talk about creating, about human beings as creators, and about the two major kinds of creations that we do, which is the creation of the real world through our perceptual body and the creation of the fictional world with our minds, and the interaction between those two and how they interfere with each other and that kind of thing.
All right. And
I'd like to hear your story about being in the communications course at the forum.
Yeah, I look forward to sharing it. Have you seen or read, I assume there's a book of The Secret? I think a lot of people, when they hear you talk about creating, might be hearing of it from a different kind of standpoint, kind of like The Secret, if you're familiar.
I watched part of it and quit.
Yeah.
So
well, I'll just mention that that's not what Brad's talking about. Brad's not talking about
okay.
the power of positive thinking and your ability to like materialize and shift reality just out of your thoughts. There are some people who have even taken, a kind of minimal understanding of quantum physics and the ability in the fact that like the observer role in quantum physics, and somehow extrapolated that into this idea that humans have this kind of mystical and metaphysical supernatural ability to manifest reality just with their thoughts. That's not what Brad's talking about. Of course, you do have a lot of power with the way you think and look at the world, but he's talking about a different kind of creating.
Yeah. The kind that you do in spite of your best efforts not to.
Yeah. Good.
So I've been particularly enamored recently of this historian who's an Israeli historian. His name is Yuval Harari. And Yuval Harari says that about 70,000 years ago, human beings were just a little patch of animal in north section of Africa, middle North Africa. They weren't very big, didn't amount to as much as like toads or mollusks or something. There were a lot more important creatures all over the world.
Yeah.
And then in that last 70,000 years, we took over the world. We have taken over the world. And that the thing that allowed us to do that was our ability to operate together according to a fiction that we all agreed upon. And he pointed out that countries and corporations are called legal fictions. That is, there is no such thing as a border between one country and another. There's just a bunch of houses and land and people out there. And that the legal fiction says this much is this state and this much is this other state. And that basically our ability to do that in large numbers way excels our closest neighbor, which is gorillas or chimpanzees. They basically, the rest of our sister and brotherhood can't agree on a common fiction more than about 10 at one time. But we can do them at about thousands and thousands upon a time. So our ability to create these fictions as they're alternative realities, they're not reality, they're just thoughts about reality, but they get treated like reality and they allow us to act in accord with each other so much that we eventually conquered the whole world. We took over the world from the rest of the creatures.
Yeah, I'd say that there are some collective fictions that billions and billions of people are sharing, like about like the importance of money, or
that's what he says. Money is the most successful legal fiction in all of history.
Yeah,
everybody believes in money. And money is nothing but, like, I remember many years ago in my early 20s, my first acid trip, I was blown away when we went out after we'd been tripping for about 6 or 7 hours. And we went to a restaurant and they gave us this delicious food for a piece of paper. I couldn't believe it. I was completely blown away.
I've been listening to the Waking Up with Sam Harris podcast. He has like single-handedly, I'm 41 years old. I've never done LSD. I've never even really wanted to, but he's single-handedly convinced me to do LSD. So I just asked one of my employees to get me some so that I can try LSD.
All right. Well, take it in a safe environment with a friend that's done it before, if you can, or have them on call. Just be in a pleasant circumstance. Don't be outdoors. Don't go to a rock concert. Don't do those kind of things. Do it for what you learn by being with it.
And why do you think don't be outdoors?
Well, just because there's so many distractions. People that take it and go to concerts and stuff end up having their whole trip controlled by whatever impinges upon them from the external world. And you'd like to be able to have your trip come partly from the external world, partly from your own internal world.
And how about just out in nature, like camping or something? I think that's what we had intended.
That might be okay. You need one camper that doesn't take it. That's sort of their job is to like babysit. Yeah.
Okay. Well, that's only.
But anyway, go ahead.
It's only peripherally related to what we're talking about today, I guess. Obviously we're not here to talk about acid, although it can be one of the tools to help us like get in touch with this idea of creating and this capacity that we have that most of us just aren't really aware of, that we're just doing without effort all the time.
That we are creating. That everything that you perceive outside of you, you're creating with your own biochemistry and your own brain.
Yeah, totally.
And you're creating speaking to me now, and I'm creating speaking to you. And I'm creating the thoughts that I have that I am imagining are coming from you, but I'm creating you, creating those thoughts with me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's this shell of bone around my brain. Everything that I'm aware of happening is happening behind this bone that there's no windows into, not even through my eyes, not through my ears. It's all taking some signals from the outside world, recreating them as electrical impulses, and reinventing everything that's happening out there. Einstein has this awesome quote that I also learned through sorry about that squeaking, that I also learned through Landmark. It says something like, our approximations of the world, everything like these equations like E equals mc squared, but every approximation we make of the real world, we'll never be able to compare them with the real world, and we can't even imagine what it would mean to do so. We can't even imagine what it would mean to compare our approximations of the world with the world. And I think he compared it with like a watch. He said like what he's doing and what most of us are doing in trying to understand the world is kind of like looking at the face of a watch, listening to a watch, sorry about the squeaking, and trying to imagine what's going on inside the watch. And you can take these guesses and you can make these guesses about what might be happening inside the watch that's making this hand move in the way that it's moving, but you could never compare your guesses with what's really going on inside the watch. And you can never even really understand like the mind-blowing difference that there is between the approximations we're coming up with of what's happening in the world and what's happening in the watch.
That's exactly what that's what the double bind is about, this wonderful skill that Harari says allowed us to take over the world. And it's also the same skill that allows us to do incredibly horrible and inaccurate and abusive and stupid and destructive things. That basically they're our brilliant ability to invent an alternative reality is also our major evil. And the source of all evil in the world is basically, this is what I'm saying. Harari doesn't say this. I've added this on. But basically, that it's this great blessing is also our greatest curse. And so, as I've said before, like many times, and part of this was probably stolen from the forum. It has to do with your ability to alternate between your perceptual reality creation and your fictional reality creation, and to check and see if your fictional reality is matching to some degree your actual present tense experiential reality, and to check back and forth with other people. You have to do that because your mind is not a very reliable instrument. It creates all kinds of alternative interpretations that have nothing to do with what's going on actually in the world. And the reason that radical honesty is so necessary is because unless you're honest with me and I'm honest with you, we're not getting the value of a checkpoint with another observer. We're just getting a lie to modify and screw up our poor little crippled interpretation that was probably wrong in the first place.
Yeah.
So that operating according to a mutual lie, like in couples, is that basically each one of them has their own set of interpretations of what's going on in the relationship. And when one of them starts lying to the other, then the relationship goes completely to hell because neither one of them have any checkpoint with each other about what's actually going on.
Gotcha. Yeah, so in the communications course, they really spent like 2 days, I think, just trying to get us to, kind of like what you do with radical honesty. It's a little bit, in a way, a meditation, trying to get us to silence the part of our brain that isn't really directly responding to reality, that is in its own world. They refer to some of it as you're already always listening, so like a listening that you have that's just always there in your brain. They refer to a lot of it in this course as the morass, just the swamp of your brain. And then they're just kind of constantly getting you to try to recognize that that's happening, let it be there, but also kind of like re-center on the stimulus of the world around you. And they had this little test throughout where they were like repeating sentences like Franny and Joey took 6 eggs and 3 cartons of milk to the grocery store on bus 13. It cost 36 cents, and then they returned home by 4 p.m. as their mother, Janine, had told them. So they have these like sentences, you listen to them, and then you have to write down what they said. And it was just kind of this practice of us getting a little bit better at just like not coming up with our own pictures of Franny and Joey and like, oh, that reminds me of when I also went to the grocery whatever. It's just like, I'm just listening to these words you're saying. I'm just recreating the words you're saying. And then at the very end, I mean, honestly, in a way, the whole class felt like it felt like a waste of time to me until the very end. But I get that it wouldn't have worked if they had just And
then at the very end, then what happened?
At the very end, there were 2 exercises. The first was what they call recreation. So it would be me listening to you. The prompt we had didn't matter, but the prompt was just, what did you get out of this weekend? And just like really listening to you. Again, listening to the words you're saying, repeating back to you the words you're saying verbatim, just being like wholly present for receiving your communication to me. And then the second half of this, which was still the first step, was repeating back to you not only the words you're saying, but like taking in your energy, your attitude, and reporting back to you all of that, the commitment that I see in you underlying the way you're talking and why you picked that thing in your energy. So in a way, it's stuff that like I think Fritz would say is still imaginings, but it's based in a deeper level of perception than we're usually imagining from.
Right. He would admit that better imaginings come from more groundedness. Yeah.
So that felt really good. I mean, I think part of the reason too that we've evolved, and been so successful is that we've built in this like evolutionary payoff. Like we have an evolutionary payoff with sex. It feels good, so we do it. It makes the species survive. I think we also have that same kind of just like dopamine or something when we just have a true connection with another human being. And so to say that to someone or to have that said to you felt like a high. I mean, it felt great to just really connect to someone. I felt better when I was saying it to the person even than when I was hearing it from them.
And what were you saying?
I was just saying, repeating back what they're saying to me. So, you know, what I got out of the course was, you know, greater insight to how I'm so afraid of not getting love from people that I'm not willing to give it myself or whatever. And then like also saying, I also, you know, hear your commitment to being in love and to coming from love. And, you know, so the interpretation or imagining that is grounded in what you're really perceiving from them when you're in this place of like more pure listening. So that felt to me really good. It felt great to hear someone on a level that I rarely actually hear people. It felt good to be heard by him as well. And in Landmark, they call that recreation, where I'm recreating their communication, not just the words they're saying, but where they're coming from, what they're experiencing, what they're feeling, what their underlying commitments are, all of that. So that was the first step. And then once we kind of got there and had that kind of like emotional payoff, then we had these prompts that we repeated back and forth to each other. And I'll just do it with you. So I'm going to say the phrase, you repeat it back to me, but repeat it back to me as if you're generating it, not as if you're repeating the words back to me. So,
okay.
I am creating.
I am creating.
I'm creating you.
I'm creating you.
I'm creating you, creating me.
I'm creating you, creating me.
I'm creating you, creating me, creating you.
I'm creating you, creating me, creating you.
I know who you are.
I know who you are.
I'm creating.
I'm creating.
I'm creating you.
I'm creating you.
I'm creating you, creating me.
I'm creating you, creating me.
I'm creating you, creating me, creating you.
I'm creating you, creating me, creating you.
I know who you are.
I know who you are.
Well, so what did you get out of that? It took me about 3 or 4 repeats the first time before I just got fucking shivers up my spine. And with you, it took me like 1 repeat for that to come back for me. So, I mean, it's not very
Me too.
dissimilar.
I feel like that I'm experiencing being present to you as a creator, as a fellow creator, and that we're both creating each other.
Yeah.
And I feel slightly invigorated and moved by it.
Yeah, me too. I felt both times, I just felt like what felt like shivering up the back of my neck and like kind of the hair on the back of my neck standing up. And I did have imaginings because we all are always in that morass and stuff, but where my mind wandered to as I was, when I first said that, with him, I didn't want to interrupt it. I didn't want to interrupt the experience. I wanted to just keep going until he got it as well. And so I just kept going, but I was starting to have like fucking back spasms. I was like, my body was going through some stuff. And the imaginings that I was having were like stardust floating past. And like when I was saying the next 2 times I said, I know who you are, I was like mentally in my mind telling him like, I remember you from about 300 billion years ago when we were just floating dust in the sky, you know? And like, I'm letting you in on this secret. I know who you are. You know who I am. I am you. You are me. Like I was just trying to say that all to him. And at some point he was just like, oh my God. And he just had the same experience. And it felt really profound. I feel shaky even talking about it now.
What I thought about it, since you wrote me a little bit about what you got from that, is that we have this story about God It shows up in all the different religions, basically. There's a story about God, about a savior, about a creator. And I believe that story was invented so that we would pay attention in our story book life, and we might actually get it in our bones in our real life every now and then. That the only way to preserve the story was to throw it into the rest of the story, which is all just interpretations with no certainty. You can't ever tell what's going on inside the watch or the biology being or whatever. But if you go ahead and put it in a story now and then, people in their experiential life will come across, oh, all right, I'm God. That's me. I am the creator. And so are you. So we're gods together here.
Yeah. I wonder, I mean, sometimes those stories, which in a way are aimed to help us get closer to the truth, do also take us further, because
they do, yes.
Never really internalize that. They never really take responsibility for, I mean, it's possible that they never really take responsibility for that it's always still outside of them. And like you said at the beginning, like, we don't take responsibility for ourselves being creators.
Yeah. So when I want you to co-create with me, or you want me to co-create with you, one of the things we have to do is to be able to share intimately both our perceptual creations and our fictional creations. And we have to own them as what we are currently creating with. And then I have to get what you're currently creating with. And then we have to find some kind of a co-creative space. And that co-creative space is the one that human beings are all thirsting for, I think, and looking for. It's like, it impresses me more and more how Donald Trump is searching for an intimacy he's incapable of. And so he does all the showing off and braggadocio and causing a stink every 24 hours to get attention, because the closest he can get to shared co-creatorship and intimacy is getting people to pay attention to him. And I see this a lot with a lot of us. We're out here basically showing off as a substitute for being present and being honest and out loud, and for being in the riskier space of seeing if some other co-creator who's as powerful as we are wants to co-create something different, or disagrees with my creation, or wants to modify or mess up my beautiful, pure, self-created stories by coming up with some new data or something that I don't want. Because I like being the one who's in charge of the story.
Yeah.
I like comedians a lot. I've decided now the only persons I'm ever going to vote for, if they aren't funny, they don't get my vote, period. And you better be a comedian if you're going to get my vote. Because comedians are constantly wisecracking about the ill-fittedness of certain interpretations. And the self-contradiction of a whole lot of people when they're doing one thing, thinking another, and et cetera. Louis C.K. came on the Tonight Show, where he's supposed to be, is not like regular channel show. He's supposed to be careful about language. And the host asked him, well, what do you think of Donald Trump? And he said, in his carefulest way, he's a lying sack of shit. So all you got on the TV was beep, 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 beep. And they said, oh, okay. But everybody knew exactly what he said, because nobody had to hear the words. Because everybody pretty much agrees that Donald Trump's a lying sack of shit. And the dialogue and deliberation that we have with each other, the more we acknowledge each other as creators, the bigger playground we have. I think the most fun of playing with other people comes from playing in the biggest playground, which it includes all of the real world, perceptual world, created world, and all of the legal fiction world. And then we're playing with matches and mismatches and partial matches and interpretations. And basically, there is no certainty. If you get used to it not being certain, it can be fun.
Yeah. Good. Well, I have a lot of other things that that I got out of the course and that we could talk about that came through my mind when you were talking about, but I think they're all a little bit off topic, and I really like this topic. So I'm not going to take us down any of those rabbit holes. Is there anything else we want to say about creation and creating and our role as creators?
No, I like being a creator, and I like creators. I mean, highly creative people tend to be the ones that I try to befriend and hang with, wherever it is, like at the golf course. I even have one friend who's a Republican who's even relatively creative. So it violates my usual prejudices. And I really like creative people. I like people who listen funny and who repeat things back with a twist on them, and just they're kind of compulsively creative. I like that. I think creating is one of the most fun things there is to do. Yeah, in the last e-zine I put out, I think you got a copy. I hope you did. There are two links. One is the Pope. The Pope made a 15-minute TED Talk. And I've become Catholic because of it. And he was talking about this, believe it or not. He was talking about the same subject we're talking about. So go ahead and look at what the Pope said, because it's really blew me away. So
great. I really enjoyed talking to you. There's not enough of this kind of communication about creation. I'm glad you referenced the author that you talked about. I think Sam Harris really does talk about this sort of thing a lot too. So yeah, it's a conversation that'd be nice if more of us were engaged in more often. This is just our second podcast. I really look forward to doing a lot more of these with you, Brad, and we can get into some of the other issues that came up.
Thanks.
I know, thank you. Yeah, have a good week, and we'll see you guys next time for the Radical Honesty podcast.
Okay.